Welcome back for another fascinating conversation. Today's episode of the PeopleNova Podcast is resource rich, so you'll want to circle back to the show notes for all the links to topics we touch on. We chat about strategies, sub-strategies, and decision making. Do you struggle to make decisions? Are there too many variables? Does a blank slate inspire or frighten you? Would you be happy with your choice, or would you burst into tears? We'll sort these out during our chat with Kaamil El Reyess, a tech product manager who helps companies answer fundamental questions such as which products to grow or which technology to acquire. Stay tuned. Hi,
Hello.
Kaamil. How are you?
I'm doing great. Quarantining with the best of them.
That's right. Kaamil, do us a favor and introduce yourself for our audience.
Sure. Great to be here, Rachel. Thanks for asking me to join you. My name is Kaamil El Reyess. I have about 15 years of experience in tech, working in roles from customer-facing support engineering roles to strategy, marketing, product management, mostly is what I do, but really helping organizations figure out how to grow, how to execute. And I just love it. I love working in tech, and I feel very lucky to be doing what I do.
And you focus on a little bit of the design and prototyping. I know you helped us with a workshop on sprint thinking.
Yeah. So really, what I focus on, Rachel, is answering some fundamental questions for a business. Where does the business want to be across multiple different time horizons? And I think any sound business is planning across multiple time horizons at the same time at once. So 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 8, 10, whatever you want, but you can't just think about your 10-year plan. You can't just think about your 1-year plan. You need multiple time horizons. And what are the fundamental questions that are important for each one of those time horizons? What products are we going to build to grow? Which companies are we going to acquire to grow? Which innovations are we going to invest in to grow? How do we formulate a strategy to meet certain goals? So if you think about it in terms of what I like to think of as like a strategic hierarchy, this is really a lot of what I do is what's the organizational goal? Let's say, for example, let's hit $1 billion in revenue. Okay, that's the goal. And then what are the strategies underneath that feed up into that goal? And then you'll have sub-strategies below that, projects, tasks, all this sort of hierarchy, so that ideally, when your team comes into work every day, they know what they're doing that day, and they can sort of trace it up that strategic hierarchy and say, today, what I work on is going to help us hit $1 billion revenue by, contributing to strategy X and strategy Y, and et cetera. And it just is very clear mapping that I think is really important. And in that, so I do a lot of that. And in that, my primary focus is product management. Which products are we going to build? Which features are we going to prioritize? What is the value proposition we're focusing on delivering that solves a certain specific pain for our users, helping our users achieve specific goals, do specific jobs? It all starts with that. What's the pain the customer's feeling? And then your goals and your strategy all have to serve that goal. It's a little bit of a broad cross section of running a business, but it all has to be cohesive. Everything you do has to be cohesive, from your strategy to your
Alignment
goals and your products. Alignment. Everything has to be aligned and communicated throughout the organization.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. And it's not enough for certain people just at the top to know about the strategies and the goals. And no, it has to propagate itself all the way down throughout the organization. And that's, what I do. And then once that's done, once everybody understands the goals and the strategies, then I dive into the product management piece, which I love doing.
Yeah. And so weaving in this alignment, right, and realizing that there's a lot of human element to alignment and goals and direction setting. You work kind of on the product side. I work on the people side, both in strategic capacities, right? And I do a lot of discussion around OKRs, objectives, key results, right? Making sure that what people are working on is available and shareable within the organization. You talk a little bit about like the people at the top, like knowing everything and like understanding what the goal is, but like as you broaden out in the organization, folks may be less clear, right? And so helping folks, I think of a big Viking ship with oars, like everyone paddling in the same direction.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. There's a really famous scene in Finding Nemo, where all the fish get trapped in a fisherman's net, in this fishing boat's net. And so I think it was Nemo, he starts telling all the fish in the net, start swimming in the same direction, right? And once the fish all started swimming in the same direction, it worked out for them. They got out of the net. But yeah, it's exactly that. It's alignment. Not everybody has to know everything. I don't think that's reasonable, especially in organizations with hundreds and thousands of people. But everybody from top to bottom needs to know enough. So they, that uncertainty, that lack of clarity breeds a lot of negative sentiment in organizations, and that sort of snowballs and builds.
Unnecessary negative sentiment.
Totally unnecessary. Totally unnecessary. What do human beings do when things are uncertain and they don't know? They start inventing things. They make stuff. Exactly. They start filling that leadership vacuum, that fact vacuum with their own stories, their own scenarios and conclusions. Some of them may be within the realm of possibility, but other stuff gets way out of hand. And so I think, you have to understand that an organization is made up of human beings, and these human beings have feelings, they have needs. We talked about product management. I think everybody would benefit from thinking a little bit like a product manager, Rachel. Your customer is not just the person using your product, right? Your boss is a customer of yours, right? You're providing a value to your boss. Your colleagues are customers of yours. You're providing value to your customers. And you have
your
to think
direct
about
reports,
their
right?
needs.
You're a leader or supervisor. The people
exactly.
who report into you, you're providing a product or a service.
Bingo. And your employees, your direct reports, are seeking to gain value from their employment with you. And if they're not achieving that value, they will go elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And so a good leader sees themselves as a product for their employees who are their customers, and that leader is there to serve them. So just like you build features and value propositions for your users of your software app, you have to think of your needs of your employees, your bosses, your colleagues, because we're all human beings. I've heard this term people strategy. I think there's something to it.
I think there's something to it. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Still, I totally want to delve into, right, this concept of like organizations are a collection of humans, right? Like whether you think of it as like a gaggle of geese or an ensemble, in an orchestra. I was just teaching my students this the other week is however you frame it, every single part of that organization is a human being, right? And as our entire business world has shifted, because of the efforts to mitigate COVID-19, we've really figured. I think collectively we're having this aha moment of the impact on humanity and how we really are not. It's not so much business to business as it is human to human. And we're realizing the importance of relationships and empathy in the workplace, more so than any thought leader could speak on. I think there's just a visceral moment right now. So, what is that phrase, that concept of like humans do business with other humans, or work? How does that impact you, or like what do you think when you hear that phrase?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think what we're going through right now is a really important lesson, an example of situations where we have to do more than what we originally thought we would be doing. It's showing, I think, the importance of versatility, adaptability, resourcefulness, trying to anticipate the needs of others before they need it, right? The reason, for example, one of the reasons we're staying home is so we don't get sick. Another reason we're staying home is so we don't get other people sick, and so we don't force others into situations where they may get sick or put in harm's way. I think a lot of businesses now are trying to think of ways where they can provide more value for their customers, frankly, because they're afraid of losing their customers. I mean, think about restaurants, right? What more can we do for our customers beyond what we've traditionally done? If we're a sit-down full-service restaurant, what can we do for the sake of our employees, for the sake of our investors, the sake of our landlords, our customers, our neighborhood? Our neighborhood would not benefit if this place was shuttered and boarded up, right? So let's start doing takeout. Let's start doing home delivery. Let's start doing curbside pickup. All of that, I think, is important and is a lesson in finding new ways to help our community and help our ecosystem beyond what we've normally done every day before this all happened.
Before all of this mitigation and the shelter in place and everything, I remember seeing a quote somewhere that said, when you buy from a small business or from a local business, you help someone buy a soccer uniform for their kids, right? Like that small business owner who's serving the community, who's living in the community and serving the community is not just, the diner, is not just the owner of the gas station, but is also on your kid's soccer team.
And the ripple effects of one failure in this, in this chain is pretty drastic. It's pretty dramatic. One business fails, those families suffer. Maybe the building is foreclosed on, the bank fails, the bank lays off employees. The ripple effects are really widespread. And the only other example that I can think of when this was, when maybe the world and the nation went through something like, of course, I wasn't alive back then, but I'm thinking about the World War II era, where people were just mobilized in mass doing things that they weren't planning on doing in their lives, right? Being drafted in the military and going off and fighting in all these foreign lands, the women running the factories and, Rosie the Riveter and all that. Who would have imagined in the 1930s that people's lives would turn out the way they did in the 1940s when the war, was underway? And I think now we're seeing a lot of that. Who would have imagined that, we would be dealing with such human issues that, our grocery store clerks are essential employees now. And if they get sick, and if we don't think about their needs as human beings in this business ecosystem, all of us will suffer. It's fascinating. I don't know what it's just so mind-bogglingly huge to think about. I think it's going to take a long time for us to sit down, reflect on it, and start seeing patterns that now in the moment we may not be able to see.
So let's try and provide some inspiration, right? So it is a tough economic picture for a lot of folks. But it doesn't need to be dismal, right? There are moments where humans really do shine, and you realize the value of colleagues turned friends, of businesses forged over social engagements and social events, not your traditional forced kind of networking event. How do you see those relationships strengthening and those either small businesses or entrepreneurs? What words of inspiration can we provide for them?
That's another very deep topic. I've noticed myself having I guess my conversations have become a lot less superficial with people, having much deeper conversations with people on a more frequent basis. Even my best friends, we all live apart. We all, we have kids and careers and all of that. We could easily go like a month without talking. And now we're like making deliberate plans to talk once a week, once every 2 weeks, playing some online game together or something like that. And while we're playing that game, we're having conversations. We're asking, much more intimate questions, asking how each other is doing and all of that. And I think one reason why I think it's important is because, yes, we're going through this difficult time, but, and I think millions of people have said this, we are not alone. I think that's obvious to everyone. But the way to get through it is just solving one problem at a time. I think try not to solve everything at once. Try not to fix everything at once. We're out of. We need to stock up on groceries. Well, what do we need first? We need milk. We need eggs. Whatever. We'll get certain things from here. These other things we can wait another week. Whatever. Try to solve one thing at a time and not allow yourself to be overwhelmed. That's easier said than done. It is a very overwhelming situation. Mm-hmm. But I think one strategy that I try to employ personally is try to solve one thing at a time. And I find that it helps me be much more productive and effective when I do that. Because ultimately, I think you and I have talked about this before, Rachel, whether you are talking about your family unit or you're talking about your corporate business, 1,000 employees, 5,000 employees, whatever, I think each one of us has the same exact job. Each one of us has the same exact responsibility, whether you are the CEO or you are a junior software engineer right out of college, and everybody in between, or as a mom or a dad or whatever, you have one job, and that job is to be the best damn decision maker you can be. And that's it. It doesn't matter if you're a software engineer or a marketer or a mom or a dad or a financial analyst. Your job is to be the best decision maker you can possibly be. And the only thing that varies is in my opinion, is the context and the breadth of your decisions, right? As a parent, you're making decisions on behalf of your kids. As a software engineer, you're not making marketing decisions, probably. You're making software engineering decisions. As a marketer, you're not making software decisions, you're making marketing decisions, etc. But you are making decisions. And the outcomes, whether it's a business outcome or a family outcome or whatever, the outcome is the net result of the decisions that you make along the way. And I think we get caught up in life too much, where we forget. We think, okay, I am just a software engineer. I am just a financial analyst. And we don't see beyond that. And in fact, we are decision makers, and our job is to make the most sound decision possible at every decision point. And once, it just helps me frame what I do in my life, and things become much more tangible and achievable when I break it down that way.
So I want to stay with that concept of decision making, because one of the things that I know folks that I've worked with and leaders that I've coached is sometimes they struggle with decision making, and there's a whole theory about the paradox of choice, which I love, right? Which I think is a fascinating study that basically breaks down and says, when you have either unlimited options, or you have an entire 24 options of a particular decision you need to make, right? You get overwhelmed and you end up not making a decision. And you're like, there's too many data points. There's too many things. I can't make a decision. I'm just not going to make a decision. I shut down and move on. And it's actually interesting how if you have fewer decisions, you can actually, fewer constellation points or data points, you actually can make a decision amongst the fewer ones and move forward on it.
It is a huge problem. We choke when we have more than, I think it's like 3 or 4 options. Actually, just last week, another friend of mine recommended that I read that book. That I think it's called, you said, The Paradox of Choice, right? So it's on my homework list to read that book. But I'll give you an example from my personal life. Many years ago, my in-laws came to visit, and we took our nephew to Toys R Us before we had our own kids. And we thought, this is going to be great. We're going to be the cool aunt and uncle. We're going to take him to Toys R Us. He can buy anything he wants. We took the kid into Toys R Us. He looked up and he burst into tears. He had a breakdown. He was just overwhelmed with the sheer volume of choices. He had no idea what to do, right? And the fact is that, 10, 20, 30 years into our career, into retirement, it doesn't matter what age you are. We choke on choices when we have more than 3 or 4 things to choose from. And one of the things that I've tried to do, and I've practiced this on my kids, and I think it's a silly little exercise. If you had to put all of your options in a hat and just pick one, and that's it, there was no going back, and you picked option 3 out of 5, for example, would you be happy, or would you want to burst into tears like a child who didn't get what they wanted? And if you picked option 3 and your gut told you, I picked it, and right now I'm suffering trying to choose between these 5 options, but if you randomly picked option 3, it doesn't feel right, I don't want, then throw it out. And you've just eliminated one of your 5 options.
It was never a valid option, right?
It was never a valid option, right? You didn't really want it. Right? And if I pick option 5 out of the hat and your reaction is, oh, thank God, it's option 5, then it was option 5 all along. Right? Yeah. So, yeah, it sounds so silly, but I think we overcomplicate things. And
I think it's a great framework. I think it's a really helpful way when we make decisions all the time. And sometimes I know a close friend of mine, we were chatting, and she was like, oh, I struggle and I stress and I second guess myself all the time when I make a decision. And I'm like, not me. I just make it and I move forward. So it was just, we had a great conversation about how both of us orient differently to decision-making. I definitely suffer from paradox of choice at times. I find myself, I'm like, okay, like I need to figure out how to funnel down my options. Right. And I love how you say, like, put them in a hat, write them on a paper, put them in a hat, like find your funnel. I lean in a lot to kind of value systems, right? And like, what are the things that are really important to me? And is this decision helping me live that value, right? I'm a very healthy person. Like that's definitely one of my values. I live that. I eat well, I exercise, I yoga. And there's 1,000 different yoga videos right now on YouTube. And I just started picking, right? And the beauty is you can pick one and you don't like it, you can stop it, you can go to another one, as opposed to like going to the gym and like, oh, I didn't really like this, but this is what I got.
Totally. So that you can stop it and you can go to another one. So there's, I don't know if you've ever spent time reading the Amazon leadership principles.
Yeah.
It's like these 14, essentially it's Amazon's philosophy about leadership. And there's things like, leaders are frequently right, or leaders never say that's not my job. I don't remember all 14, and sometimes they change, but there were a couple that stuck with me, and one that really stuck with me. So 2. We don't need to wait for all of the information to make a decision. Sometimes we just make a decision with partial information, and that's okay. So by the time we get all the information, assuming we are able to get it all, maybe it's too late to act, right?
Right.
But on top of that, there's this other idea that says decisions are almost always reversible. So if it takes so much pressure off when you think about, is this decision reversible, right? If I start this yoga class, okay, it's 10 hours of video, whatever. Well, guess what? 15 minutes into it, if it's not jiving with you, go to another one or whatever. And so many business decisions are reversible. Mm-hmm. Very, very few things in life are not reversible. And just reminding myself of that just takes a lot of pressure off of the decision-making process. And I love the idea of lowering the stakes. Mm-hmm. And one way you lower the stakes is by reminding yourself that things are reversible.
I love that. I'm going to go back to the first one you pointed out was you make decisions with the information available. Like nobody has every piece of detail, understands every consequence, right? I think sometimes we get stuck also with consequences, but no one will ever have 100% of the information when you make decisions. You make the reasonable, the best decision you can with what's available. And I think a wonderful attribute that I look for when, I'm trying to give examples of good leadership is the ability to learn from your decisions, right? And when you make a decision, when you implement a change or strategy, or you go down a new business path, right? If you have the humility and the awareness to be able to say, like, all right, knowing what we know now, we should probably not continue this, new business path.
Yes.
That's a great statement, right? It's not a failure. It's not a egg on your face. It's not a you're incompetent or imposter syndrome. It's I learned in the process, and I learned that this is not viable. So to your point, let's reverse it. Let's
pivot. The word startups uses pivot, right?
Pivot.
And I think we're very lucky coming from the tech sector, Rachel, you and I, where pivots are not frowned upon. Pivots are actually respected. And entrepreneurial failure you're not shunned for it. You become a more valuable, I think from my experience, I've seen founders who become, investors want to invest in somebody who's been to the rodeo a few times, even if they didn't have these stellar outcomes. And there's a lot of value in failure from, like you said, learning, good ego adjustment, all of that.
I think it's getting away from the emotional reaction to failure. And I don't know, where that came from, right? I don't know if it's a generational thing. I don't know if it's I jokingly call myself a recovering perfectionist, right? Because I did have that like binary mindset of, either I succeeded or I failed. Either I was smart or I was stupid. Love the work of Carol Dweck, right? About, how if you identify as a binary mindset, you have a choice, you have an option to migrate to a growth mindset. And I practice that every day. It is a practice. I know I do it. I advocate for it with my clients and the people around me and my students. Like,
this is fascinating. This is fascinating because what causes this? That is such a great question. Is it generational? My gut is telling me that the generational aspect is a big factor here, and I would love to know what you think about this. What is the opposite of a fear of failure or perfectionism? Could it be this dire need for like instant gratification, right? If something is not working immediately, if I don't get what I want or what I expect in a very, very short period of time, I'm moving on to something else.
External validation, right? Like
external validation, yeah. Or a business result, a financial result, whatever. Like I see those as two opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Stick with itness, stubborn, ego driven. I'm not moving on from this thing until it works. I'm not pivoting. Versus 2 days into it, this isn't working. It's time to throw it all out and start over, get something else, right? And I don't think either of those things, right? The instant gratification or this like stubbornness is good. But like my question is, how do you calibrate yourself? How do you calibrate your business and your team to be in the right place along that spectrum? I have no idea. I'm asking you. Tell me.
I don't have all the wisdom of the ages. But the way that I start to unpack that question is really self-awareness, right? Like I took a lot to work on myself to really understand that it was my orientation to perfectionism. And I don't think it was my parents. Like, I don't know where that I picked this up. I don't know if it's gender-based, right? Like, but I did, right? So the point is I was able to work on my own self-awareness and realize how that orientation to perfectionism was not serving me. And once I became aware of Carol's work and really I leaned into it heavy, in order to help give me the space to say, you know what, I've never done this before. How could I ever expect to be perfect the first time? Right. That was just unreasonable for myself. And I don't want to own it. I want to say that I put that expectation on myself, that I should know how to ride a bike. I should know how to produce a podcast. I should know how to, rock climb a really hard route. Like, no, these are growth opportunities, and they're opportunities for reflection. They're not failure opportunities. And I find her work fascinating.
I got to tell you, one word you just said, I think sums up our entire conversation and ties together all of the topics that we've talked about in the last half hour. And that is the word expectations. I think, one of the very first things we talked about, how does a business set goals and strategies and sub-strategy and projects and tasks, right? And how does it disseminate the information across the entire organization? One big reason you need to do that is to set the proper expectations with your team. How do we deal with this pandemic? Why are maybe some people struggling to deal with it more than others? I think maybe another aspect of that is expectations, right? Is it reasonable to think that you're going to get through life without any really disastrous situations that you're going to have to deal with? Is it reasonable to think that you're going to get through life without dealing with war or poverty or illness, cancer, death of a relative? Is it reasonable? I don't think it's a reasonable expectation to not expect some hardship, really bad hardship in your life. And I think the word you just said sums all of that up. Expectations. Expectations, I think, also help you make better decisions. If your decision making is based on proper, reasonable, well-aligned expectations, then your decisions themselves, I think, could be more effective. It is such a huge, I think we could have another 2-hour topic just on expectation setting. Right?
We could talk forever. One of the things that when I think about expectation setting and like not being hard on myself is also is empathy, right? And having space, being empathetic with myself, being empathetic with, the people that I work with, and understand that, maybe we can't all fire on all cylinders all of the time, which used to be my expectation. And that was unreasonable expectation. There we go. But also leaning into that, to the human side, to the empathy side of, we all have feelings. Our feelings are valid. How each of us are coping individually and maybe collectively with our family unit or extended friend unit at a social distance, physical distance, space, I think really has to do with our emotional awareness and emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. The negative feelings, I think, are a big effect. There's actually a book that I just finished reading about a month or two ago. Amazing title, the best title of any book that I've ever read or heard of. It's called Unfuck Yourself. Have you heard of it?
I've not. I'll put it on my list.
No. It's about, I guess it's based on ideas of Stoicism, which I was not familiar with.
Okay.
But one of the big lessons from that book, and I think from this school of philosophy, is setting right expectations, as you and I just said, but also understanding that sort of your life is like this mix of things, good things and bad things and neutral things, medium things, right? A lot of times as human beings, again, human beings in business, human beings in family and friendships, whatever, we tend to overweight the negative things, right? We tend to overweight the negative things so much that it's almost as if the negative things become the only thing. And we forget about all the positive things. And another trick, and this book talks a lot about it, I highly recommend it, very simple read, quick read, is to allow the negative things to happen, allow the negative emotions to happen. They're useful. They're telling you something, that you should be scared, that you should be suspicious, that you should be nervous, that you should prepare more.
You
right?
should experience grief. There was a great article recently that HBR published about, hey, that feeling that you have is grief. And I shared it with my students. I was like, it's okay right now to be grieving.
Totally okay.
Yeah.
We are not machines. We're not rocks,
Yeah.
But the trick is, don't inflate and overweight the negative feeling so much that they become the only feeling. There are positive things in your life as well. There are positive things happening in your business might be struggling, but it's not all struggles, right? So once you accurately weight all these positives and negatives in that equation in your mind, in this chemistry set in your mind, then again, you start setting better expectations, you start making better decisions.
Yeah.
And then you can solve one problem at a time in sequence.
Yeah. You acknowledge that emotion that you're feeling. I call it my weekend of grief. Like I struggled to really sort through all of the emotions that I was feeling and the uncertainty, multiple uncertainties, right? And I was able to feel that and hold space. Self-care is not selfish, right? And be able to focus on what I needed in order to then think clearly and develop options, right? Because there was too many, the paradox of uncertainty was terrible, right? But be able to like sort through and then think clearly, right? So I entirely encourage everyone to do that. Kaamil, we're running out of time. I really appreciate everything that you've shared with us. But one of my favorite questions to ask everyone. Yeah. What is, share with our listeners, what is your favorite art? Your either modality or if there's a particular piece. And while you're thinking, the reason
my favorite art, ART, yeah.
ART. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
As you can see, I enjoy art.
Yeah.
The reason is one of my favorite quotes is from Darren Walker. He said, "Without art, there is no empathy. And without empathy, there is no justice."
Oh man, absolutely. I believe that fully. I think a lot of injustice in the world stems from people having a lack of empathy for one another, or knowing that they're hurting someone else and not caring. Art is extremely important. My wife is an artist. She's a graphic designer and a surface pattern and fabric designer. So art is a big part of our lives. The art that I gravitate towards, I love beautiful, beautiful machinery. I love beautiful cars and planes and boats. I don't know why. Maybe that's just my engineering and techie background, kind of finding an artistic outlet. But there are certain cars, when I see them, I kind of get goosebumps. Just knowing that something is that beautiful and functions at such a high level, while also being beautiful. I would love to. I aspire to create something like that someday.
Oh my God, that is fantastic. I love this question because I have no idea what I'm going to get. It's great. It's great. Oh, goodness. Thank you so much, Kaamil. I really appreciate you spending time with us. Thank you for sharing your insights, your thoughts, a few resources and tips I will make sure to put in the comments for our listeners to double click on and dig into. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Kaamil.
My pleasure. This was awesome. Thank you, Rach.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye now.
Thank you for joining us on the PeopleNova Podcast. My name is Rachel O'Neill. The team here at PeopleNova Human Capital would love to hear from you. We are always curious to hear from our listeners. So go ahead and send us an email, podcast@peoplenovahc.com, with your workplace questions or suggestions for who you'd like to see on our show. If you send us an audio memo, we may include your question on the show. Lastly, we are here to amplify. Our guests are amazing entrepreneurs, and we want you to forward our newsletter to someone in your network who needs to know the amazing things our guests are doing, so together we can make an impact. Thank you so much. Take care, and we will see you next time.